All right, so we brought our top and bottom plates that we just laid out to our wall location here. We're gonna be building this front wall. It's really important to remember when you transfer your plates to take them exactly the way you laid them out. So you laid them out flat, put them together, bring them over, and then separate them, making sure you don't flip one end for end, otherwise your layout will be off. So right now we basically have a mirror image, top and bottom, of our layout, and that way our studs will run straight. So we now have our plates in the location that they're going to be going. We also have the components to our door framing here. So if you remember, we laid out our king stud. We have our shoulder stud right next to it. Same thing on the other side. And then our header sits on top of our shoulder studs. So we also have our cripples that are cut here. If you remember, we laid out 2 of these cripples. They're gonna go right here. We're gonna add 2 more right on the end. So any opening framing that you normally frame, you always finish this shoulder stud here all the way to the top. So we just add these 2 cripples on both ends. So what we're gonna do here is anytime you're framing a wall, you always want to frame your openings first. That's why we have this door set in place. The reason why we do that is, if you remember, we have this king stud here to be able to nail into the side of our header. If you have this stud laying right here, you wouldn't be able to access it to nail through the side. So nail your openings first, that way you have plenty of access. Then you can come back and lay your other studs in and nail through the top and bottom plates, and you'll have plenty of access. All right, so to get started here, we've laid all of our parts in place, but one thing we want to do before we start nailing anything is to crown our boards. It doesn't really matter which way you lay your crown. I always try to lay it up. That way, if there is any hump in your board, basically you have the front and back laying on the floor. If you have the belly laying towards the floor, your wall is going to start rocking when you're framing. It's just harder to do. But what you do want to make sure of is whichever way you decide to have your crown going, you make sure it's the same for the whole wall. If you have one board that's crowned up and one board that's crowned down, when you lift the wall up and you get to the finishing stages with your drywall is going to be all wavy along your wall. So if you keep everything the same, it'll just make for a nicer finish when it comes time to do the finishing stages. So we'll crown all of our boards. I'll put them up. Looks like. All right. Oops. All right. So we got these guys all crowned up. Our bottom plate fell here, we'll get that back on. You wanna lift that side up, Azad? All right. So now we are going to lay out, you wanna put this down for a second? There we go. We're going to read our layout lines here. Remember, we have an O for our shoulder stud and an X for our king stud. We'll go ahead and line up our shoulder stud here first. This one is pretty much the most important one because we want to make sure that this line right here, this is the inside of our rough opening, we want to get as accurate as possible with that. So we'll go ahead and nail this one first. Whenever nailing on 2x4s, we're going to do 2 nails, and we're going to go straight right in the middle of a stud, just like that. But we want to make sure when we're nailing, we don't put our nails too close to the edge like this. 1, you're going to split out the wood, and 2, you just don't get enough meat and it's not very strong. So you want to come in about 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and nail straight into the middle of your 2x4. So we'll lift this guy back up. We'll line up our shoulder stud here. And we'll start a nail. All right, notice I didn't go all the way with my nail. I have it just so it's almost coming through. That way I can come back and get this guy exactly where I want it. Couple taps and now you can see it's got a little bit of the wood. Double check, we're right on that line. You can drive it home. Put the second nail in. All right, so our shoulder stud is nailed on the bottom. So one thing when selecting your shoulder studs, we already pre-cut ours, but this is where the second part of our rough opening comes in play. So if you remember, our rough opening was 38.5 by 82.5. So we cut this shoulder stud, so the top of it to the bottom of it is 82.5. So this is the bottom of our bottom plate, and you can see we have exactly 82.5. That doesn't mean we're gonna cut our shoulder stud at 82.5, because we have to account for our bottom plate. So we actually cut our shoulder stud at 81. That's 1.5 inches shorter than that 82.5. We leave this bottom plate in when we're framing the wall. That way, when we lift up this wall, we have a connecting point from this side to this side, and it keeps our wall straight. If we were to cut this out right away, we could have a chance where this jamb would be out of alignment of this jamb, and our wall wouldn't be straight. It would be hard to put the door in, and it just wouldn't be a good deal. So we'll lift the wall up, nail it in place, and then we'll cut that bottom plate out a little bit later. All right, so now that we have our shoulder stud in, we're gonna take our kink stud right up next to it and go ahead and nail that in place. All right, so now one really important thing to keep in mind is we're going nice and straight with our guidelines, our layout lines, but we're also going really, really flush with our edges of our studs here. The more time we take right now, the easier it's gonna be for our finishing stages. I'm a finishing guy. I hate it when framers come in and have this stud sticking out 1/2 inch. It just makes for a really improper line with your drywall and your trim boards. So be nice to all your finish guys and make sure all your studs are nice and straight and flush. All right, so we got this guy in place. We're gonna do the same thing on this side. Get these nailed in place. Line up our shoulder stud. And then nail off our king. All right, so now we can come up here to the top and we can see that our header will sit nice and firm on that top of that shoulder stud. What I like to do before nailing off the header is to nail off your shoulder and your king together. And it doesn't take many nails, but what we want to try to accomplish is getting this surface nice and smooth. Again, it'll help out the drywall crew whenever they're hanging their sheetrock. So what we'll do is we'll just come in through here and add a few nails. And when I'm nailing these nails, I'm going at a little bit of an angle. If you go straight, you're gonna be coming through your wood with these 16 pennies. So just go at a little bit of an angle and it won't come through. All right, so if you guys can see a little bit, this stud is a little bit higher than this stud, and that's what I want to try to take out of this pair here. So what I'm going to do is just drive the nail in a little bit, raise this up, get it flush, and nail it off. All right, that one's nice and flush. And we're pretty flush the rest of the way now. So we'll just add one more nail in here. All right, we'll do the same to this side. So now that those guys are nailed off, we can focus on our header here. So what we're gonna do is we have two 2x6s nailed together, and we actually put a 1/2-inch spacer in here. The width of our studs here are 3.5. So we have 1.5 inches, and that's that equals 3. So we put in this 1/2-inch spacer. Now we have 3.5. And the reason why we do that is to equal the width of our 2x4 stud here. So what we'll do is we'll have 3 nails coming in the side on this top one and 3 on the bottom one to finish off that nailing pattern. To talk a little bit about headers, again, our rough opening was at 38.5, so we added the 3 inches to account for our shoulder stud so it can sit on top, and we cut this one at 41.5. Typically a header is 2x6 for like your windows and your doors, up to a certain point. If you remember on our original layout, we had that 6-foot door. Whenever we get more than like 5 foot and 6 foot, we want to bump that header size up just a little bit. So we chose to do a 2x8 for that header. Excuse me. So if we have a window that's a little bit larger, say we have maybe a 7 or 8 foot opening, something that we don't normally do, we do have a load calculator for those size headers that is available online. All right, so we're going to nail off our header here. Again, we're gonna do 3 in the top and 3 in the bottom. So we'll get our nails here, and we're just gonna start the nail again. Just so it's just about coming through. And again, this is where we really wanna take our time and make sure it's flush. If you can see, it almost appears that it's not flush. We have this ledge here, but these 2x4s have a rounded edge. So you really wanna just take your hand and float that gap there and feel that we're nice and flush. We don't want to go like that where it appears flush, because now we're sticking out about 1/4 inch. So just take your hand, go over that, float that gap there, and make sure we're flush. Get the nail started, check again, nail it off. All right, so we got 3 and 3. We're gonna repeat that process on the other side. All right, header is in place. So now what we'll do to prepare for our cripples is we're gonna go ahead and put on our top plate. So we'll get this straightened back out here. We'll lift that top plate up. Oop, back over a little bit, there we go. So if you see now, if we can get a close up here, our mirrored image, our king studs line right back up, right where they should be. We have that missing shoulder part here, but remember we have that extra cripple that we're gonna put in there, and that'll fill that. We have these 2 other cripples, and this guy lines up. So put this back in place here. Line it up and we'll nail this off. All right, so I know a lot of guys like to pre-cut all their parts for their door. That's a good idea if you're really good at it. But with volunteers, I tend to like to get all the doors framed and then come back in and take a measurement. It's pretty easy to do all the math. But a lot of times it'll be an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch off. So this is just a more accurate way to do it. So when taking a measurement, this is a pretty skinny door, so it should be pretty much the same all the way along, which it is. It looks like we have 6 1/8 all the way across the way. But if we had a wider door, a good idea is to just take a measurement at one side. We have 6 1/8, and take the measurement at the other side, 6 1/8, and then cut your blocking. If you take a measurement in the middle, this top plate might be bowed a little bit, so the measurement won't be exact. You want to bring this top plate into straightness. So if you keep your cripple studs the same all the way across, then when you nail it tight, it'll bring it straight. So we can take these guys. They'll be a little tight. You want them to be snug. Place them in there. That one went in pretty well. Place that one in there. All right, so again, nice and flush. This one went a little too far. Just bring it back out a little bit. There we go. And then we can nail these guys off. So just like a normal stud, we'll do 2 through the top, and then we're gonna do what's called toe nailing, and I'll show that in a second here, but let's get these tops nailed off. All right, this is a really good time if you have some volunteers. While you're nailing off this part of the wall, you can have your volunteers bringing in the rest of the studs. So guys, you wanna grab some studs, crown them, and put them in their place? All right, so we have our cripples in place now, nailed from the top. So the last thing that we need to do is attach them to our header. So what we're gonna do with that is called toe nailing. And what toe nailing is taking a nail, coming in the edge here, and going it at an angle. You can kind of see maybe right here. By the time we get done, we'll drive it through at an angle through here, and then it'll get the meat of the header. So what we're gonna do is start our nail here, get it going at an angle. And you notice that when I started the nail, I started up the wood a little bit. If we started right here, we're not gonna get much of the meat of the cripple stud here. And we'll probably split it, and it just won't be a good connection. So we wanna come up a little bit and make sure we get enough of the meat of the 2x4. And just nail them in place. Now, it's a little bit harder with these little guys, but if you had a little bit longer of a cripple stud, you can notice when I hit that down, this kind of went into place a little bit further past the header. Could I borrow a hammer, guys? If you had an extra hammer here, what you can do is get it under the stud here. And then one, that'll support the back of your stud, but it'll also bring this cripple stud up just a little bit higher than this header. So what happens when you start hitting this home, oops. Okay. So now you can see we're higher than that header there. If you keep hitting it, it's gonna bring it to right where it needs to be. If you start higher and hit it flush, it'll come out good every time. If you start flush and start hitting it, it's gonna go past the header and you're gonna have a little bit of trouble. So. nice and flush. Last one here. Right. So our cripples are now in place. So we're ready to move on to our full length studs. So the process is gonna be very similar to what we just did with our door opening. We're basically just gonna nail the top and bottom with 2 nails. But I do wanna talk just a little bit about the studs that we chose. These are pre-cut studs. These studs are actually measured out at 92 5/8. That may seem like a little bit weird measurement, but when you put these studs into the wall and you measure from top to bottom, also remembering that we're actually gonna have a double top plate on here. If we hook on here and measure this out, we're gonna have an extra 1.5 inches, and that'll come out to about 97 inches, 97 1/4. And that's a little bit larger than 8 foot. And what that's gonna allow you to do is when you put your drywall on, drywall comes in sheets of 4x8 and they go horizontally along the studs. So if you do 4 foot and 4 foot, that's gonna be 8 foot. And they give you about 1 inch of playroom. So you can hide that at the bottom of your floor. You also have drywall at the top of the ceiling, that's 5/8. So you'll have about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of gap on the bottom of your floor. And that way you don't have to cut sheets, you can just throw them in. It's much quicker, and any gap or play in the floor, you can hide at the bottom with trim. So that's why you use pre-cut studs. All right, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and nail these studs off. So if you remember, we crowned all these studs just like we did with the door. So all the crown is going the same way. We chose for the crown to go up. So they're in place, and we can just go and put 2 nails in the top and bottom of each stud. Okay, so we have just finished nailing off all of our studs, and we have one more step left to do to finish framing this wall, and that's to put in our corner posts. So we have this side wall here. When we lift this up, we're gonna have another wall here on this side, and we need something to be able to nail each wall together with. So we have this corner post. This one's already put in place. And basically what it is a 2x4 that's laying flat, and we nail it through top and bottom and through the side. That way, when we have a wall coming in this direction, we have something to nail into that side of that wall with this corner plate. It also adds a little bit of a nailer for our drywall, and that'll make a little bit more sense when we get inside once the walls are up. But since it's shoved over this 1.5 inches, when we nail this into place, it's gonna leave 1.5 inches of screwing surface for the corner of our drywall. So it does double duty. So this one's in place, so we're gonna show you how to install one on this side. So we have a 2x4 selected. It's just a normal pre-cut stud, just like the rest of them. So what we're gonna do is we wanna make sure we have a nice straight stud for this one. We don't want any twist. Make sure you take some time and choose a straight one. And the reason why we want to choose a straight one is because we want to make this corner as straight as possible. We're going to be using a level to make sure our wall is plumb. And also, whatever curve this board has, this side stud's going to pick up that same curve. So we want all 4 of our corners to be nice and straight. So just take some time and choose a straight stud. So basically what we do is we put it in place, lay it flat, and we're gonna try to get it straight with the bottom edge of our wall here, top and bottom, and then we're gonna nail along the edge here to get it in place. So we'll start by nailing the bottom here. And again, we're using 16 pennies. Double check that it's flush. and then come back to the top and nail this one. All right, so you can almost see here, we know that this stud that we selected was straight. We're tight at the bottom, and you can see that when we move this, it moves this side stud and actually brings it into correct straightness. So we can bring this guy, make sure it's nice and tight at the top here. Push it tight, bringing that straight. And nail it in place. All right, so we have our top and bottom nailed. And then what we're going to do is take a clamp. Our clamp's over here. And if we just nail this, we'd have, you can kind of see, we have a lot of vibration going on. So a quick tip is to just take one of these quick clamps here. Throw it on, make sure you're flush. Squeeze it down really tight. If you don't squeeze it tight, it'll just bounce off when you start nailing. And that'll give a little bit more of a solid surface to nail to. Okay. Got one at the middle, we'll get one at the bottom. One at the top. All right, so that is our corner plate. And then that leaves us with a completely framed wall.